All right, so are you worried about the possibility of OSHA showing up in your lobby for a surprise inspection and you're not quite sure what to do about that or how to prepare for that possibility? That sounds like you. Don't feel bad, you're definitely not alone, and you've come to the right place because I've created this series of videos called How to Pass Your OSHA Inspection. And in this edition of the series, I'm going to talk about how to actually manage an OSHA inspection, how to manage that process. So the problem is a lot of companies treat the inspection process too casually, and that can end up costing you literally tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the key steps and the key things that you need to start working on now in order to be prepared for the possibility of getting inspected and how to manage that inspection process. But before getting into that, if you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe to our channel and make sure and hit that notifications bell so that you're notified every time that I upload new content 2 to 3 times per month, where I'm going to talk in detail about the most important environmental health and safety issues and regulations that impact small manufacturing and industrial companies. All right, so my name is Russell Carr, and as I've mentioned in previous editions of this series, I've helped many small manufacturing companies navigate the entire OSHA enforcement process, from that initial inspection to fixing citations and violations, and also defending and fighting back to get citations and violations thrown out. And during this series, I'm going to share with you the most important things I've learned through those experiences so that, again, you can prepare for and pass your OSHA inspection. All right, so with that said, let's get started. All right, so let's get started here. So now that we've already covered how to prepare for an OSHA inspection in the previous video, in this video, we're going to talk about how to actually manage an inspection if that ends up happening at your company. And here are the areas that we're going to cover. So we're going to begin by talking about how to deal with the inspector. And there's definitely some things you want to be aware of around this and manage that relationship and that interaction very carefully. Then we're going to talk about the inspection 3-part process of OSHA inspection. So they're going to start off by having what's called an opening conference, and we're going to talk in more detail about all this in a minute. Then there's going to be the inspection itself, and then there's going to be what's called a closing conference. So let's look at each one of these areas in more detail. So let's talk about how to deal with the inspector, and there's several bullet points I want to go through here. Number one, I want to emphasize is if this is not obvious already, they are not there to help. Believe me when I tell you that they will use everything they see and everything they hear against you. So they're there for one reason only, and that is to identify and cite health and safety violations. So I guess my point here is, the obvious, but also keep in mind that a lot of these inspectors, you're going to get all kinds, but a lot of them are very, professional. They're polite. They're smooth. You can easily kind of get lulled into the sense that they're there to help you, and you can ask them questions and be honest with them and all that. Don't do that. Again, they're not there to help. They're not there to consult with you. They're going to find violations, and they're going to use everything that they see and they hear against you. I can't overemphasize that. When they show up, make sure to request their credentials and get their business card. You're going to need that business card later, and I'll explain why. But also get their credentials. It's rare that you're going to get impersonator inspections, but I have read about that happening. Always be, professional, polite, and patient with them. They're people too. If you're rude, if you're standoffish, if you're argumentative, they're people. They're gonna fight back and they're gonna push back. It's not gonna work to your advantage. Always, we talked about this in a previous video, but always keep your answers short and to the point. They're going to ask you a question. You don't need to tell them any more than what they're actually asking for. Try to avoid drifting and going on and on. When that happens, it's very easy to incriminate yourself. Remember, they're going to use everything they hear against you. So be careful about that. Just stay to the point. If they want more information, they'll keep asking questions, but just keep your answers to the point. This is similar to what I just talked about. Don't offer anything more than what's asked for. Again, listen carefully to what they're asking for. Just give them what they want and nothing more. If they want more, they'll keep asking. It's okay to ask questions, but be specific and careful about that. Again, it's easy to kind of drift, from a question into a monologue or asking too much that might, expand the inspection or incriminate you. So you can ask questions. That's okay, but be careful about that and be specific about that. Another thing, getting back to the being professional and polite, never lie. Obviously, the just like anything else, the cover up is always worse than the crime. Always be honest. Don't argue with them. Don't debate with them. If they tell you what they think a violation is, just make note of it, but don't argue or debate with them. It's not going to help you. All right, so let's talk about the OSHA enforcement process in more detail. And keep in mind that this entire process could last, 1 to 2 hours if they're just looking at a specific hazard or hazards, or it could take an entire day, or it could literally take, weeks or even months. And that's going to depend on the triggers and the scope of the inspection and the circumstances. We talked about the, triggers and scopes in the previous video. Also keep in mind that if the inspector has to deal with health exposure issues like excessive noise or hazardous chemical exposures, they might end up having to come back or spend that entire day conducting exposure tests, because a lot of those exposure tests take 8 hours to complete. So anyway, keep that in mind. So let's break down each of these areas and how to manage each, and I'll begin with the opening conference. So the opening conference is going to happen when the inspector arrives. Then the inspection again is going to happen itself. And we'll talk in more detail about that. And then we'll get into the closing conference. So let's talk in more detail about each one of these. So the opening conference. So during the opening conference, this is where everything begins. The inspector should tell you what triggered the inspection. And again, this could be an employee complaint. This could be a national emphasis program. This could be high injury rates. All those different triggers that we talked about in the previous video. Any one of these could be the trigger. If they don't tell you, what the trigger is, make sure, to ask. This is your opportunity to find out what the trigger is and try to figure out what the scope is. If it was an employee complaint, ask for a copy of that complaint. You want to get a copy of that, it's okay to ask for that. Yep, just covered that. So the scope, they should tell you what the scope of the inspection should be. Again, the trigger often is going to determine the scope, like we talked about in that other video. But again, make sure to ask them what the scope is going to be. If it was an employee complaint, they're probably just going to look at a specific hazard or a group of hazards. If it's a comprehensive inspection, boy, they're going to tell you that, that they're going to be looking at, scrutinizing, and evaluating all areas of your compliance program. Hopefully that's not the case, because again, that's where a lot of the bigger fines and penalties can end up triggering at a company. But make sure to ask that if they don't tell you what the scope is. This is your chance to find out, and this will help lead to how you manage the rest of the inspection. If it is going to be a comprehensive inspection, or even if it's going to be a focused, hazard inspection, attempt to negotiate access in the scope if needed. So you don't want to argue with them, but you do have the right to try to negotiate with them. For example, as we talked about in a previous video, if it's a specific hazard that's all the way in the back of the plant by the rear door, don't walk them through the entire facility where they might see more violations and expand that inspection. Walk them outdoors all the way back to that back door. Bring them in, show them where that, that specific hazard is, and then walk them back out the back door and outside. They understand that. They, they know that you can do that and it's okay to do that. So when they tell you what the scope is and what the issue is, you try to negotiate with them for access to your facility if you can, because that could help prevent the inspection from being expanded. All right, so once the opening conference ends, they will quickly move on to the facility inspection, itself. And here are some of the points and how to manage, the inspection itself. So always stay with that inspector. You always want to be by their side. You don't want to let them wander off on their own. Again, when they wander off, they can see all kinds of things that could add up to more violations, fines, and penalties. Again, as I talked about a minute ago, take the most direct route to the inspection area, even if that means going outside. I've already explained that and why that's so important. Another important thing to do is make sure to take detailed notes of everything said and done. So bring, a pen, a pad with you. Every time they say something or make some sort of observation or point out a problem, write it down. You want to take detailed notes of everything said and done. Related to that, you want to duplicate and record everything the inspector does. So if they pull out a camera and they take a picture of something, you stand there and take a picture of the exact same thing. Video, you take video. Duplicate and record everything that the inspector does, not only on paper, but any sort of recordings or pictures that they might take. Another really important thing is to correct violations on the spot if possible, and take photos or video to confirm that you corrected the violation. So in other words, if the inspector notices that a guard has been removed from a piece of equipment, replace that guard right then and there and take a picture of it. It's really important to do that. If the inspector finds something, fix it. If they point out that a employee is not wearing safety glasses, then go get safety glasses and get them on that employee. Fix violations as they identify them. Really important to do that. If you just walk by it and don't fix it, that's gonna raise red flags for that inspector, and that's not gonna go well for you. Also, again, as I mentioned before, it's okay to ask questions if needed, but again, get to the point, be concise, and be careful about that so that you don't incriminate yourself. All right, so once the inspection ends, then we're going to move into the closing conference. Again, this could be an hour after it started. It could be at the end of that day. It could be weeks later. It could be months later. So they're not going to have that closing conference. My point is they're not going to have that closing conference until the inspection itself is finished. So on day one, if they're not finished, they're not going to have a closing conference. But let's go ahead and talk about what the closing conference consists of. So during the conference, the inspector should verbally review all the violations that they noted and that what they plan to recommend for formal citations. And there's a detailed review process they have to go through, but they should tell you everything that they noted as far as violations and recommended citations. Sometimes they'll tell you what they believe the citation type will be, whether it be a de minimis, other than serious, maybe even a willful, sometimes not. But if they don't tell you what type they are going to recommend, it's okay for you to ask so that you know that where you stand. In that previous video, we talked about all the different types of citations, how much the fines can be, and so forth. So it's important to understand what they're planning to recommend. Again, you can get clarification if needed. This goes back to the point I've talked about before when asking questions. It's okay, be concise, don't argue with them, don't debate with them. If they make a recommendation for a violation, you just have to make note of it. Debating with them is not going to help. I can't overemphasize that. I'm sorry, related to that point, if they do talk about a violation and you're not sure how to fix it, it's okay to ask them how to fix it. Actually, it's going to work in your favor because they want to know, just like I mentioned before, if they see a violation that you can fix quickly, fix it. If there's a violation that you're not sure how to fix, it's okay to ask for guidance on how to get that fixed, because that's important. They want to know that you're going to take action to get things fixed as quickly as possible. And I'm going to explain more about that later on. Also, let me end up by saying that this is not the end of the process, okay? So I can't tell you how many times I've heard from a company that, hey, we got inspected, we had a closing conference, or we just met with the inspector. We haven't heard from them since, so I guess everything's okay. Unfortunately, unless that inspector specifically told you that there were no violations and they're not going to, issue any citations or recommendations for that during a closing conference, unless they very specifically say that, the process is not over. It's important to understand that they have up to 6 months to actually issue citations, fines, and penalties. So that letter might not show up literally for 6 months from the end of that. So this is not the end of the process. In the next video, I'm going to talk about what to do after an inspection if the inspector has noted and recommended any violations. All right, so I'm going to wrap this part of the video up for now. Make sure to stick around for a moment here. First of all, before getting to the end, if you have any comments or questions, maybe you've been through this whole process, you want to make comments below, I'll make sure to read them and respond to them. If you have any questions about the video, post them below and I promise to respond. But hang out for a second here. I'm going to make a very special offer to help those of you who are looking to be proactive about that, about this whole thing. Make sure that your safety program is up to date. I'm going to make a special offer to you. All right, thanks again for watching. All right, so let me begin to wrap up by asking you a very simple but also a very important question, and that's this. Are you and your company really ready if OSHA shows up tomorrow in your lobby for a surprise inspection? The fact is, if you're like most small manufacturing and industrial companies, the answer is probably no. And if that sounds like you, don't feel bad. Again, you're not alone. But the fact is, if that's the case, you're currently at major risk. The fact is that OSHA goes across the country every single day and hits small companies just like yours and issues all kinds of citations, fines, and penalties that often run into the tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you got to ask yourself, could you really afford that? So having said that, I also want to make the point that the best preparation and the best way to pass an inspection is to know and have the confidence that you have a fully functioning OSHA compliance health and safety program. I know that's easier said than done, but at this point in time, I want to make a very special, free, no obligation offer to you to help you get on track if you don't have a safety program right now. I want to offer you free enrollment in our small manufacturer safety school. So let me tell you about this program. What it does is it gives you the training, the knowledge, and the resources so you can actually start to build a customized safety program and get prepared for that inspector. So let me explain what comes with that program. It's a three-parter. Number one, we have the mini OSHA crash course designed specifically to meet the needs of small manufacturing and industrial companies. So in this free training, I'm going to walk you step by step through the process of determining which OSHA compliance requirements apply to your company and how to build that program and how to manage that program for the long term. Another really important thing to understand about this crash course, it's built for non-experts. So most of the people, most of the companies that come to us, they don't know anything about safety. So I built that program with that in mind. So even if you know nothing from safety, you'll really benefit from it. The other thing that you're going to get is an OSHA compliance check sheet. So after you watch the course, you can use this as a self-assessment, gap assessment tool to see which one of these OSHA laws applies to your company, figure out if you have it in place or not. If you don't, this document will also function as sort of a roadmap forward to get your company on the road towards compliance. The final thing that we're offering in the Small Manufacturer Safety School, I'm going to invite you to live, free, monthly training sessions where I'm going to do deep dives and cover everything that's covered in the crash course so that you can learn step-by-step instructions for actually how to build a customized safety program for your company. Again, it's free, it's no obligation, you have absolutely nothing to lose. I'm going to put a link in below the video here where you can enroll and get started immediately on your road towards compliance. I look forward to seeing you in some of those live sessions. Also, make sure to stick around for the next edition of How to Pass Your OSHA Inspection. And finally, if you haven't already and you like what you learned today, please go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Make sure to hit that notifications bell so that you're notified every time that I upload new content, which will be 2 to 3 times per month, diving deep into the environmental health and safety regulations and issues that impact small manufacturing and industrial companies. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.